I think Utah's in the middle of a lot of things. It's interesting. There's a lot of talk about offer sheets, and after Holloway and Broberg last year, and people are talking about guys like Peterka, and the bigger names are always the sexier names. But I've had a few teams tell me that what more people are wondering about are kind of the Holloway and Broberg types. Like Joel Hofer is a name that gets mentioned a little bit out of St. Louis, and that makes sense. I understand that one. But I'll tell you another one that got mentioned to me, and also I think it's a pretty sharp idea. I don't know if it'll happen, but Utah has Jack McBain. And, McBain's a center, and he's a bigger guy. He's 25 years old. He's 6'4" center. Teams are always looking for those kinds of players. Big centers are hard to find. And I think the Mammoth really like him, and I think they're trying to sign him. But that's a name that a couple people were telling me when we were talking about offer sheets. Who's an under the radar type that could get one? McBain was a name I heard quite a bit, actually. Low key, I heard another team, Seattle. I think Seattle is really eager to take a step this year. They have a lot of cap room. They have a lot of draft picks. They have a lot of flexibility. And, I don't know how Jason Botterill feels about offer sheets or Ron Francis feels about offer sheets, but it was pointed out to me that Seattle has a flexibility to go down that route if they wanted to. So that's another team people are watching. Montreal and forwards. I know there's a lot of talk about the Montreal D. I know Nick Hague's been linked to them, and I could see it absolutely. But I've heard a little bit about upgrading at forward too. So Montreal is another team that I've heard with that specifically. And I think some of that focus could be on, who do they envision playing with Demidov for a while? Is there somebody out there that they would look at and say, those are two people that could grow together a little bit? So that's kind of what I'm looking forward for Montreal. Now, we're going to talk a little bit more about the Combine for the final thought, like some of the questions that were asked. But those were some of the teams I heard a lot more of coming out of there. Mammoth, Kraken, Canadians at forward, and we'll see where we go.
I guess with Montreal, when they got into the playoffs, the first round against Washington, maybe a little bit unexpected with how much production they got out of Dvorak and Anderson and Brendan Gallagher, which was great to kind of help balance out their lineup. But I suppose you're right, long term, that's not likely to be an option for them. So trying to seek ways to improve them in that part of their lineup as they project out 2 to 3 and even beyond years there makes a lot of sense from Montreal's perspective. Because at the top, you think they're in a really good spot.
They're fine.
Sign Jake Evans. Going to be great. Lower in the lineup and killing penalties for you. Right in the middle of there, I could see being a huge priority for them.
Like Dvorak is a free agent, right? So you're looking at, just like everybody else, you're looking for a 2C, but not only that, you're looking for a 2C to play with Demidov. Like in the playoffs last year, Dvorak, Anderson, and Gallagher was your second line, and deservedly, but ultimately you see Demidov as that guy with someone else. By the way, Kyle, we've also talked about how this was the one meeting or sort of get together for everyone since they won't be at the draft. I had a team that brought up to me, and I forgot about this. There's another one coming up. It's not as big, but it got a lot of attendance last year. And there's an agent, Dan Milstein, who brings all of his clients, draft-eligible clients, down to Florida. And he did it last year, and he's doing it again this year from June 20th to 23rd. And it sounds like almost everyone is going. Calgary last year, one of their top prospects is Matvei Gridin, who they took in the first round. they went and took a long look at him at this camp last year. That's not what tipped the scales or anything like that made them take him, but they really liked him, and that was another place where they got a chance to see him. And we were talking about on our pod that was the one get together. Like I said, I had a couple teams reach out and say there'll be a lot of teams at this one too, because it's a place where you can see a lot of prospects, and the teams last year felt it was valuable.
All right, last pod we talked about Gavin McKenna a little bit, Elliot, and it's kind of been an ongoing conversation throughout the year because of how brilliant he's been, and you can only imagine how in demand he would be if he was to choose to go the NCAA route next season, not draft eligible until 2026. You got some interesting feedback after our last pod, or just some comments anyways, about where he could be going and just the intrigue around the player in general.
I just wanted to say, like, there's some things that, there's some times it's hard to realize because social media is the mob now. Nobody controls the mob, right? It's hard to predict sometimes. Like there are times I say, oh, I'm going to drop this on the pod. I'm going to write this in my notes and it's going to be massive and nobody cares. And I'm like, boy, was I totally wrong about that. And there's other times where I drop things on the pod or in the notes and nobody's going to care about this. And all of a sudden it's a gigantic fiasco with 4 million impressions. And I said, wow, like I didn't think that was going to be a thing at all. So you have to be prepared for anything. I have to say the McKenna stuff and the reaction to it, it's a big deal. And maybe I kind of knew that already, but the amount of feedback I got on it was massive. Like, this is big news where he's going to play next year. And again, because I'm not watching the juniors or the NCAA as much as I'm watching the NHL, maybe I didn't take it seriously enough. I don't know. But where this kid's going to play next season, there's a lot of interest in that, a ton of interest in that. And, and as I said on the pod, I asked a bunch of people, and the name they came up to was Penn State. But I think, and we'll see if that turns out to be true or that turns out to be incorrect. But Kyle, the thing that really stood out to me was how many of people wanted to talk to me more about, what didn't you report? How much more do you know?
But yeah, that was what's really going on.
What's really going on. And to be honest, they're like people, and Kyle and Dom know this, I'm not that deep. Like, I'm very superficial. So there's not much more to me, really. So, but it was really fascinating. It was, sometimes when you're not in that sphere, because there are some people, and for example, Sam Cosentino and Jason Buchla from our place, who are really in that sphere, along with some, there's Scott Wheeler, there's Corey Prodman, there's Cam Robinson, there's a whole bunch of people out there who really do prospects. I obviously don't. So they probably would say you should have known what the reaction would be, but I was surprised and I was impressed at how many people cared about that.
Yeah, it does make a lot of sense. Average over 2 points per game in the regular season, over 2 points in the playoffs, 6 points in 4 games at the Memorial Cup. I mean, nearly helped lug the Tigers to a Memorial Cup championship before falling to London in the final. For a guy that, again, is still 1 year away from being eligible to be taken. Like, you think about all the brilliant things that Connor McDavid accomplished in the Ontario Hockey League, that part of his life and career, and what Gavin McKenna is doing is, Sidney Crosby too, for that matter, but what Gavin McKenna is doing is just something